Hello there, welcome to WION Live, broadcast from London. I'm Ollie Barrett, and in this bulletin we'll bring you updates on stories developing around the world. First up, the headlines. Haiti President Jovenel Moïse assassinated at his home by unidentified attackers. Interim Prime Minister Claude Joseph says that he is now in charge of the country, and this is a story we will bring you more on in later bulletins. A day after the Pentagon announced the withdrawal of US forces from Afghanistan is more than 90% complete, the US Defense Department says it will maintain robust over-the-horizon capability for Afghanistan if needed. Russia says it will do everything possible, including using its biggest overseas military base in Tajikistan, to defend its allies from threats amid the growing crisis in Afghanistan. Iran begins the process of producing enriched uranium metal, according to the UN atomic watchdog IAEA. It's a move that could help Iran develop a nuclear weapon. The US calls on Tehran to stop nuclear brinkmanship. As parts of the US and Canada continue to swelter under a heatwave, weather agencies report the month of June was the hottest ever for North America. The intense heat conditions have also led to California's worst drought in over 30 years. The Olympic torch relay is scrapped in Tokyo as virus concerns continue to mount ahead of the Games. A private flame lighting ceremony will replace public relay events. First this hour, an Afghanistan government delegation has held a meeting with Taliban representatives in Tehran today. The highly anticipated meeting comes as Afghanistan faces a domino effect caused by America's exit. The Taliban delegation is being headed by Sher Abbas Staneksai. The Afghan delegation is headed by the country's former Vice President Yunus Kanuni. It also includes President Ghani's advisor Salam Rahimi. The focus of the talks remains the deteriorating security situation in Afghanistan. The talks are being mediated by the Iranian Foreign Ministry. Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif is chairing the first session. Zarif welcomed the US departure from Afghanistan, but he warned that the people and political leaders of the country must make difficult decisions for the future of the nation. Meanwhile, the US forces' pullout from Afghanistan is nearing completion.
As we've said, Abraham, we are capable of conducting over-the-horizon counterterrorism right now. It's difficult, but it's doable. And we are continuing to explore other options in the region to be able to enhance that capability going forward. We are having active discussions in concert with our State Department colleagues about that very thing. I don't have a breakdown for you right now of what that's going to look like. But again, it's important to remember we already have an over-the-horizon counterterrorism capability. We've got a carrier strike group in the region. We've got facilities throughout the Middle East that have and will continue to be of value in this regard, so we have that capability. As for the support for the Afghans, we're still working out what that contract support's going to look like. Once the drawdown is complete, many of those contractors are still there, providing that kind of support to the Afghans and the Afghan Air Forces as you and I speak, and we are actively working ways in which that contract support can be done remotely or virtually or even physically outside the country.
Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby also made it clear that the US will maintain robust over-the-horizon capability for Afghanistan if needed. Discussions are ongoing with the State Department regarding the nature of what that capability would be. The US has maintained there's a carrier strike group in the region that could be useful if needed. Kirby says the US and NATO coalition partners will continue to support Afghanistan security forces. Meanwhile, Afghan authorities have vowed to regain control of all the districts that were lost to the Taliban. Hundreds of military personnel have been deployed to counter Taliban terrorists. This after more than 1,000 troops were forced to flee to Tajikistan. Security forces have been deployed in the northern Afghan provinces of Takhar and Badakhshan. This is where the Taliban's captured large swathes of territory and has met at times with little resistance. Afghan forces say they are focusing on securing major cities, roads and border towns. National Security Advisor Hamdullah Mohib says the Afghan troops that fled to Tajikistan are returning and will rejoin these security forces.
Those that went to Tajikistan are coming back and are once again going to be in the service of their people in defense of Faizabad. They're being brought back. People are standing. It's war. There is pressure. Sometimes things work in our way and sometimes they don't.
Afghan security forces have begun guarding the Bagram air base after the exit of US troops. Bagram is the main military base in Afghanistan. This development marks an imminent ending to the longest war in US history. General Asadullah Kohestani is the new commander of Bagram airfield. He spoke to WION about the situation on the ground.
Right now the situation is completely normal. All our troops are deployed inside and also outside of the BAF. So our patrol is going on, so we don't have any problems so far.
The US military has confirmed it did not disclose the precise time of their departure from the strategic location. Afghan military officials complained they were not informed about the departure in advance. This raised concerns that the abandoned facility was open to looting. In his conversation with WION, General Asadullah Kohestani shed light on that particular incident.
We had an initial plan in coordinate with him regarding deployment and taking security out of Bagram, which we completed on Thursday night. But when the Friday morning, when we heard about that the U.S. troop left the Bagram, we were not aware about that. And I think this is because of the safe departure. I think they didn't inform us for their safety, and they took their safety or security measurement. They didn't inform us, but the main point was because everybody understood that all the ANA units secured the BAF outside, and there is no threat from outside to the inside of the background.
Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby has defended the quiet departure of US troops from Bagram airfield. He says it was better to keep the information as low-key as possible to ensure a safe and orderly exit of US forces.
I can't speak for the level of information that that went down the Afghan chain of command, but I can tell you that Afghan leaders, civilian and military, were appropriately coordinated with and briefed about the turnover of Bagram Air Base. In fact, some of that briefing included a walkthrough of facilities on the base with senior Afghan leaders. The final conversations occurred about 48 hours prior. Obviously, for operational security reasons, we didn't go into the exact hour at which all U.S. forces would leave Bagram. Again, as I said from the outset, we have had to operate under the assumption that this drawdown could be contested at any time.
Even though the Afghan security forces are determined to take control of all the districts, the Taliban has ramped up its offensive. So how precarious is the situation for the capital, Kabul?
Everybody knows we are living in a country which 4 decades war is going on. So in combat terrain or in a war situation, back and forth is a normal issue. But the point is, we fully understand and we are assured we will take back on the area which is economical important as well as the strategical issue. But the ANA and MOD, all responsible people, they are working to get ready for the offensive operation, and as soon as possible we will start our the offensive operation to completely change the situation.
33-year-old Afghan photographer Rada Akbar has been using art to showcase her heritage to the world. Apart from her striking self-portraits, Akbar has brought a focus to some of Afghanistan's powerful female figures. But this freedom in Afghanistan brings with it a major risk. She says with a surge in violence as foreign troops withdraw, she has little hope for the future.
Dear lost treasures, I feel deeply saddened to be here today. We are living the darkest moment of our time, helplessly watching the daily loss of life. Journalists, writers, activists, human rights defenders, mothers, fathers, children. Stories are denied by the same people who came here to fight terrorism and claimed they would save Afghan women.
This is 33-year-old Afghan photographer, designer and writer Rada Akbar. Her independence, her heritage, it all reflects in her art, especially in her self-portraits. But the freedom to express in Afghanistan comes with a deadly risk.
These days are very hard. I feel that I'm very close to death these days. That is how I feel. Every day, every day feels like it's the last day. And it's not just me. Everyone that I know is going through the same. And we don't deserve this.
Each artist, reminiscent of the Mexican feminist artist Frida Kahlo, Akbar is often captured wearing a crown with heavy gold and silver jewelry in her self-portraits. But today she is having to live with constant threats for her work, showcasing some of Afghanistan's powerful female figures. Akbar has been behind a series of exhibitions celebrating International Women's Day at Kabul's former royal palaces. Last year, she used mannequins to portray exceptional figures including a filmmaker and a footballer, and also an Afghan woman, Roxana, who was stoned to death by the Taliban for fleeing a forced marriage. Rada Akbar was forced to host her latest art exhibition online on Aberzanen, which translates into Superwomen in English, after multiple threats. It was broadcast to empty chairs set up at the Kabul Museum. In Afghanistan, High-profile women, including journalists, judges and activists, have been assassinated since September 2020. The number stands at 180. The United States and the Afghan government blame it on the Taliban. Radha Akbar has lived alone for 10 years in a Kabul apartment. With threats looming, she has no choice but to restrict her movements around the country.
They might be able to kill me or remove me, my physical body, but they will never be able to kill my spirit. They will never be able to remove or erase my thoughts. My thoughts will be transformed to the next generations, with or without me. And I will never forgive them.
Like other civilians in Afghanistan, Akbar dreams of a peaceful nation and a better world for the future generations.
I have a lot of dreams. I have a lot of plans to work for this country, and because I don't want the next generation, generations go through what I went through. I want them to live in a more, in a better country.
But with each passing day and an emboldened Taliban, Akbar says it is hard to keep hope alive.
I don't know what will happen. I don't know what will be the future. I don't know if I would even be alive to see the future.
Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Violence between Afghan forces and the Taliban has put Afghanistan's neighbour Tajikistan on high alert. A day after Russian President Vladimir Putin assured Tajikistan of assistance, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov now says Russia will do everything, including using its military base in the former Soviet nation, to defend its allies from the threat coming from Afghanistan.
We will do everything, including the usage of capabilities of our military base in the border of Tajikistan and Afghanistan, to prevent any aggressive actions against our allies. As you know, we are keeping a wary eye at the developments in Afghanistan, where the situation has a tendency of getting worse rapidly in the context of hurried withdrawal of the US and other NATO troops, which failed to get visible results in the stabilizing of the situation in the decades they spent there.
Russia actually has several military installations in Tajikistan. The Russian 201st military base there is the country's largest. Dushanbe is equipped with tanks, helicopters, drones and ground attack aircraft. Russian military helicopters based in Tajikistan fired air-to-surface missiles during a training exercise on Tuesday, after the Taliban attacked the Badakhshan province. Tajikistan has tightened security at its border after thousands of Afghan troops fled into the neighbouring country. Next to Iran, and in a move that could threaten ongoing talks to revive the 2015 nuclear deal, Iran has now begun the process of producing enriched uranium metal. The International Atomic Energy Agency, or IAEA, reported that Iran intended to enrich uranium to 20%. The move takes Iran a step closer to developing materials that could be used to make nuclear weapons. The US and top European powers have condemned Iran's move. The US describes it as an unfortunate step backwards and says the window for diplomacy to resume compliance with the nuclear deal will, however, remain open.
It is worrying that Iran is choosing to continue to escalate its non-performance of its JCPOA commitments, especially with experiments that have value for nuclear weapons research. It's another unfortunate step backwards for Iran, particularly as we, for our part, have demonstrated our sincere intention and willingness to return to the JCPOA and to find more productive and durable ways to deal with the nuclear issue. We have made clear that such provocative steps would not and will not provide Iran with any leverage in negotiations.
The 2015 deal imposed curbs on Iran's nuclear program to make it harder for Tehran to develop nuclear weapons. After former US President Trump pulled out of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action Agreement in 2018, Iran began violating many of its restrictions. Tehran's already produced a small amount of non-enriched uranium metal this year, breaching the deal. Iran accused Israel on Tuesday of mounting a sabotage attack on a nuclear facility near Tehran last month. Authorities have acknowledged for the first time that the mysterious attack has caused structural damage to the site.
اولین بار هم نیست متوقف کردن تلاش‌های ایران از سوی تنها کشوری که نفت میبره که ما در حقیقت گفتگوهامون متوقف بشه داره ما پیش بینیمون هستمون این آسیب این برنامه‌ها از سوی این کشور هست.
That admission came days after the election victory of Iran's hardline judiciary chief Ebrahim Raisi and a series of other attacks on Iran's nuclear program, including the killing of Iran's top nuclear scientist Mohsen Fakhrizadeh.
ما حاضر به ملاقات با رئیس جمهور آمریکا هستیم.
خیر.
متشکرم.
There are sanctions against you.
Let's go to Brazil now. 37-year-old Felipe Luther is a scholarship student at Rio's prestigious Pontifical Catholic University. He also works as a street sweeper at night. Recalling awkward run-ins on campus, Luther says in one case a woman mistook him for an elevator operator. In another, someone confused him for cafeteria staff. Luther's story serves to highlight vast inequalities in Brazil.
By day, Felipe Luther studies at one of Brazil's top universities, above Rio de Janeiro's wealthy beachside neighbourhood of Leblon. By night, he hauls trash in the affluent communities below.
For me, in the beginning, I would think it was not going to work out. Those thoughts that I had, that this is not my place, that this is not for me, that the highest point has happened.
Luther received a full scholarship in 2017 to study social sciences at the Pontifical Catholic University of Rio. But his daily routine points to the vast inequalities in Brazil. A police raid killing dozens last month stirred fresh debate about the dangers and disadvantages facing black men like him. Almost 9,000 people have been killed by police in Brazil over the last decade. More than 3/4 were black men, according to Human Rights Watch.
After having lost so many colleagues and running away from crime and everything, being out, not being a prisoner, not being an incarcerated black body, a dead black body, or trafficking, or doing something bad. For me to be studying is something that, in the beginning, I could not imagine going back to study in this university.
54% of Brazilians have African ancestry, but there is an overwhelmingly white elite. In 2000, the national census found white Brazilians were 5 times more likely to have attended university than their black, mixed race and indigenous peers. Educational inequalities have only grown during the pandemic, with remote schooling relying on resources at home. Luther reads at night by candlelight in his student residence, which has been without power for months. He charges his phone and laptop at work and uses them to study until his street sweeping shift from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. Once he graduates, Luther wants to teach college prep courses in low-income communities, opening the door for the next generation of aspiring students.
Next, the Belgian government has announced a plan to return pieces of art looted from the Democratic Republic of Congo during colonial rule. The process will be completed over the next few years, and thousands of artworks that were taken away in the late 19th century will be returned. Belgium will transfer legal ownership of the artefacts to the DRC.
Belgium's Africa Museum, once a celebration of the country's at times brutal colonial rule, will begin a process of returning stolen art to Democratic Republic of Congo, the Belgian government said on Tuesday. From the late 19th century up until 1960, thousands of artworks, including wooden statues, elephant ivory masks, manuscripts and musical instruments, were looted from the country. Likely taken by Belgian and other European collectors, scientists, explorers and soldiers. Millions of Congolese are estimated to have died when the country was a personal fiefdom of King Leopold II, before becoming a colony of the Belgian state. Following a $78 million overhaul of the Africa Museum to take a more critical view of Belgium's colonial past, the Belgian Junior Minister Thomas Dermine said the government is ready to meet DRC calls for restitution.
For too long, the Congolese people have been cut off from this inheritance, their spirituality, the work of their ancestors. These objects do not belong in any way to the Belgian people, and they must be given back and reconnected to their roots.
But the works are not heading home just yet. Though the Belgian government will transfer legal ownership of the artefacts to DRC, it will not immediately ship them unless they are specifically requested. That's partly because Belgium wants to keep them on display. The government also says Congolese authorities are conscious of the bigger audience in Belgium, as DRC has few cultural centres or storage facilities.
It's a moral question.
The African Museum's director Guido Grisil says paying a loan fee to DRC could be one way to keep the artefacts in Belgium. He also said the museum has a large number of items whose provenance is unclear, and it could be the work of 10 to 20 years in discovering the precise circumstances in which they were acquired.
That's all we have time for on this edition of WION Live broadcast from London. Stay tuned for more on that developing story about the assassination of the Haitian president. Stay tuned to WION for that and more global news and updates from around the world.
This is right, Arab.